They are calling it Spectacular Saturday with 3 big Kentucky Derby preps and huge days all over the country in the world of horse racing. I got a spectacular group of fellas here to join me. And most of you have seen Matt with me in the morning. Matt and I, in honor of opening day of baseball, pulling a little doubleheader today, Matty. So you got the rest in, took a little nap in between, right?
Yep.
A little bit of food, but you didn't want too much because you don't want the belly to get too big, right? Just enough to keep you good. So how
exactly.
you feeling?
Got to stay ready. Watch my Phillies get a win, a rare win on opening day. And so, doing well. And, watching all the craziness at Keeneland, the weather, maybe sometimes posting the wrong horses and, keeping track of what's going on.
And next up, we got my good friend Caleb. Caleb, man, it's so nice to catch base with you again. You were helping me out doing the live streams all throughout the summer. We had fun talking Del Mar and talking lots of races. We've seen your name up top the leaderboard and some of the big stable duel contests. Fantastic handicapper, someone who always puts the work in. I'm sure you're pumped for a big weekend like this weekend. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Yeah, it's great to be back on the show, Gino. We had some fun on Del Mar last summer.
Yeah.
Made a little bit of money. Me and Barry, I see he's doing well for himself as well. Our friend, the sniper.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's great to be back on. We have a really awesome card tomorrow across 3 or 4 different tracks. And I'm really excited. Derby fever has fully kicked in and I'm ready.
Can I take some credit for everybody's success? Even if I can, I will. I'm gonna grab some of it. I'm gonna be like, give me some of that, or thank you. I'll give me some of that. Barry, you're the man. Let's take some. I'm gonna get all over the place. So love it. I love to see everybody doing well. Everybody's having fun. Everybody's making money. That's what it's all about. We're gonna do that for you all tomorrow. We're not even gonna try. We definitely are. We're going to bounce around. We're going to go from Aqueduct. We're going to talk races 8, 9, 10, 11. We're going to go to Santa Anita, look at races 4, 6, 7, and 10. We'll get over to Keeneland. We're going to talk races 7, 8, and 9. And it's actually closing night over at Sam Houston. I love Sam Houston. I've been working with them for the last couple of years. They have, for the players, they have low takeout. They do exactly what we want as gamblers. And they have, on closing night, mandatory payout pools in the pick 6, pick 5, pick 4. So we'll take a look at those races, too, if you want to dive into those later at night on Saturday. So we will be playing the races all day long on Saturday. And we're going to be firing away with our daily racing form past performances. You still have an opportunity to get these DRF Formulator past performances for free. They have an incredible match deposit bonus right now, too. You go to DRF Bet, sign up, use the promo code WINNING, deposit $250. They'll match your bonus with another $250. They'll give you a $10 free bet. They'll put 10 free Formulator cards in your account. And we're going to look at Formulator right now as we dive into the races from around the country. And Matt, let's give a little shout out also to our friends over at Stable Duel. They've got a big weekend. We had a Stable Duel live stream this morning where you, me, and Barry Spears, who Caleb was just mentioning, we dived into a bunch of stuff for Friday and for Saturday. Already had some nice results on Friday. Our buddy Barry had like a $44 winner there today. So he did excellent. Stable Duel has a couple big games, in particular, one at Santa Anita and then one at Keeneland. So there are a lot of people that are watching this will probably be diving into those big games over there.
Yep. And then the beauty is, let's say, $100 for a game is a little too rich for your blood. Listen, they got a $10 game tomorrow, Keeneland too, with a nice little payout as well. So even if you don't necessarily want to go into the big game, you can still get into the game, get into some of the action, and have some fun in some of the smaller dollar contests tomorrow as well.
Okay, well, let's jump on into it. And Caleb, when we head over to Aqueduct, what's nice is we don't have to wait very long as far as our coverage is concerned and as far as that late pick 4 is concerned for the Wood Memorial. And, I mean, let's be honest. The last, few years, there haven't been that many horses coming out of the New York prep races that we thought, these are legitimate Kentucky Derby contenders come the first Saturday in May. But right now, in this field on Saturday, it honestly looks like there are 3 horses, any of which, if they won or if combinations of them ran well, you feel like they actually have a pretty good chance. They have nice resumes and they have a lot of upside. So I'm talking about Mo Donegal, early voting, and Morello. Let's start with them from a conversation point and then kind of from a gambling point. This is actually a pretty good prep race this year. I think all 3 of the preps have multiple legitimate contenders there.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Gino. I think in the past, the New York preps have not been the strongest, like you've said. I think this year is an exception. I think the races have come up strong.
Yep.
Believe it or not, I might get laughed at if this blows up in my face on Saturday, but as it stands today, my Derby horse is in this race. It's
Awesome.
actually the 3 early voting, who you mentioned is one of the big 3. So I was one of those folks that play a lot of Winter Aqueduct. I mean, I like the track. I think you can make some money there if you pay attention to track biases and the way the track's playing. And I remember watching that Withers, and someone who's uninitiated to Aqueduct might think, 24 48, that's not that quick. But Aqueduct is not Gulfstream. It doesn't play, 22 46s. You just don't see that at Aqueduct, especially in the slop. And I thought that was just a massively impressive race. The buyer came back terrible. They've since revised it upward by about 9 or 10 points, which I think is appropriate. I love this horse, and I think I think he's a great horse in this race, but I think that it is, to your point, a very deep race. And I think we'll see a couple horses come out of this that'll make some noise on the first Saturday in May.
Yeah, the Withers race that he won, it already came back live. We saw Unoho go over and win the Rebel, a couple starts back. And Matt, looking at early voting, I did think that he makes a ton of sense in here. It'll sort of be interesting how this race unfolds from a pace standpoint, because Caleb is absolutely correct. I had David Aragona on the podcast this week to talk about these races, and he was mentioning how fast that actually was. You can tell just by looking at the Timeform US pace rating, right?
Yes.
Because it's like Caleb was mentioning, that track plays a lot different than other tracks where you might look at those fractions and go, oh, okay, 48. I mean, that wasn't going that fast early on. That's moving over there. So it'll be interesting to see, how it plays out early.
Yeah, I mean, just to your point, those early Timeform US pace fractions were, 149, 149. I mean, just blazing fast going out for early voting. And one of the things I remember from that Withers was how difficult it was for them to get early voting loaded into the gate. And I made a joke that this horse must just hate being in the gate, because I've never seen a horse take so long to get in and got out of it so quickly. And that horse made Classic Causeway look slow in terms of coming out of that gate. I mean, just a beautiful break. And that race was over in the first 100 yards. I mean, that was just a dominant performance. But I do think early voting is a horse I like a lot as well. Obviously, you can't quibble with any of the connections, Jose Ortiz, Chad Brown. But I do think Morello causes a potential challenge in terms of, maybe putting some pressure on early voting. We're now obviously early voting's already done the distance before of the 9 furlongs, but still, if Morello puts, some early pressure, maybe that opens the door up for a horse like Mo Donegal, who is more of a late closer and is a horse that, has drawn the inside and didn't have a great trip at the Holy Bull. The last time out, has been on the shelf for the last 2 months, is coming back here.
Yeah, missed the Fountain of Youth with the fever. So that was the race they were going to point to run in. And they had to take a little bit of time off. And so they pointed to this race. And so, if that were before the Derby, I wouldn't like it. In this race, they don't need to win to get some points. And that may be why I have a tough time with this race from a gambling standpoint, because I feel like it might shape up sort of well for Mo Donegal. Just like from a pace standpoint, should be able to save all the ground. The mile and an eighth should be a nice trip from this horse. Just kind of thinking about the way it might shape up. But Caleb, I always like to, but I can't really get around the top 3. Can you find anyone in here from like a win candidate, if you're playing the late pick 4, that you could use other than these kind of top 3 that we've been talking about?
From a win perspective, no, I don't think I can.
I couldn't either.
I think I tried. I tried to find another closer.
Yeah.
Because the way I looked at that race was, Mo Donegal, I think he's a very nice horse. That Holy Bull effort looks pretty good, seeing how White Abario and Simplification came back to win the next 2 preps in Florida.
Yep.
But I was thinking, okay, if early voting and perhaps long-term and maybe Morello all get up on the lead, who's the horse that's going to close? And the only horse I tried to make the argument for was the 8 Barisi a little bit.
Exactly. That's the one I was trying to get there too. It just is a tough spot going longer. As again, I didn't want to say it and not give him credit for mentioning it on my show. David had said this horse I would like maybe in the Bayshore, in like a 1 turn or like an elongated sprint race. I'd feel a little bit better, but going a mile and an eighth, and if maybe if it were Barisi and like 1 or 2 of early voting, Mo Donegal and Morello, but he'd have to really be pretty good, I think, to beat all 3 of them, to get the better of all 3 of those horses who are maybe a little bit classier right now. So, yeah, from just like a playing the pick 4 standpoint, I couldn't really get around those top 3. How about you, Matt? I felt like those were like probably the 3 logicals.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this race kind of reminds me a little bit of the Florida Derby, where the kind of the top 3 felt like the top 3, and it kind of was hard to get past them. So I just think, the pace sets up. So if you're somebody who thinks maybe early voting gets fatigued because, there's going to be some pressure, Mo Donegal is kind of the horse that's the most logical to capitalize. That would assume that Mo Donegal stays interested the entire race, which sometimes is something that he doesn't do. And, he'll kind of run in fits and starts. So there's some question marks there. But, Morello is very, we didn't spend a lot of time talking about Morello, but this is a horse that's done nothing wrong. And just has gone out and won his first 3 races, increasing speed figures every single time out, and looked the best the last time out. So I thought, this is a very good horse that posted a 96 buyers in winning the Gotham with ease over Dean's List and Golden Code. Now, it wasn't necessarily the toughest field, but still, this is a horse, like I said, it's done nothing wrong to this point.
Yep. So a nice top 3 here, looking for some Kentucky Derby points along the way to the Derby. Let's see. Yeah, we wouldn't be shocked to see 2 or even all 3 of these horses end up there, depending on what the point standings look like. But we've got an all graded stakes pick 4 to close out the card at Aqueduct, and we get to the Carter. Caleb, Speaker's Corner has been awesome as of late. He's drawn really, really well to the outside. This is a tough field, though. I got to say, there are some legitimate horses in here. Like, I respect the heck out of him, and I feel like he's no doubt the horse to beat. But from a gambling standpoint, we're always looking to try to beat, heavy favorites, and we're looking to find some value in here. There are horses just on numbers and figures. If we're playing on by, in that case, that could stack up well with him on their better days. So what's your sort of first glance and thoughts about the Carter, Caleb?
Yeah, I think it's a really fun race. It comes up pretty strong every year. It's one of the few early season grade 1 sprints that we get to see, and it's always one of my favorite races. From a wagering perspective, it's probably not the most creative opinion, but I really don't think I'm going to try very hard to beat Speaker's Corner. I think he's quite possibly the best miler in the country.
One of the best older horses right now. He's good.
Yeah, most certainly. I mean, depending on where they end up totally eventually sending Life is Good. I mean, Speaker's Corner is he's right there as far as best miler in the country. It's at least going 1 turn anyway. They tried to stretch him out a few times down furlongs. Just doesn't really seem to be what he wants to do. But around 1 turn, this horse has just been dynamite. I mean, he absolutely trounced Fearless in each of the last 2 meetings. Fearless came back on Florida Derby Day to win a race by pretty much as many lengths as he wanted to. So I really just think Speaker's Corner is a monster.
He's nice. And he's drawn really well, too, because while he's super fast and they probably don't mess around with him, he can sit if he had to. And I think he can fight, So he's really tough. Matt, there are a couple other nice horses in here, though. Like, I mean, look down towards the inside, there are 2 horses that are capable of really big races. Reinvestment Risk, he's a fun horse to sort of go through his entire career, right? First out winner. Then he runs into Jackie's Warrior twice. He's only 6-1 in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. And then he's off from November to June of his 3-year-old year. He comes back. He runs 1 race. Something obviously goes wrong because then he's off for the entire rest of the 3-year-old year, shows back up a couple months into his 4-year-old season. He basically missed an entire year. This horse came back with a huge race, got a big figure. He beat a nice horse there. He's got some ability, the one here.
Yeah, he absolutely does. I think, I always am a little cautious about horses drawing that inside in sprints, but, this is a horse that absolutely does have a lot of talent and has enough early tactical speed to avoid getting shuffled back or any concerns there. And I think the question is, when you look at it from a buyer's standpoint, that last buyer's you mentioned was just a monster effort, a 103, which was a good 12 points higher than anything he had run before. Question is he going to be able to back that up? I mean, this is a horse that has not really run consecutive races, and as you pointed out, in about a year and a half. So will he be able to back this up on, a normal rest? And I think there's some questions there, but certainly at his best is very capable of at least challenging Speaker's Corner.
And what I like is that he's had a lot of time since that race.
Yeah.
Right. They're not going to wheel him back quickly. That race was on February the 26th. So 6 weeks now. You're not worried as much about a bounce with that kind of time in between. Good spacing there. One other horse or two just worth mentioning, but I did agree with Caleb that, they're all going to have to run really well to beat Speaker's Corner. Green Light Go here. I don't really like where he's drawn. I don't think he's quite as good, but he's going to at least push the pace and make things honest, I think, from down inside. The horse who, is, he never really gets bet is Mind Control. And, you look at him and it's like, okay, well, he's capable at Aqueduct. He's capable at the Trip. He's capable fresh. He was second in this race last year, and he looks like he's been better since he's moved into the Pletcher barn. Joel jumps on. It's like he checks a lot of boxes. And if Speaker's Corner gets hammered, and this horse is around 4-1 or so, he might be an interesting horse and one who's absolutely capable. So the Carter, solid race, a lot of fun here. At least worth mentioning too. I don't think he's that good, but what the heck has First Captain done wrong?
So that's a horse I like kind of underneath. I think this is a horse maybe you play in deeper exotics because Shug tends to have something up his sleeve a lot of
down
times.
The year,
and
even, right? A couple more races, you feel like he's not even peaked yet,
Yeah, and this is a horse, like you said, has done nothing wrong, and they keep him at 7 furlongs rather than stretching him out, which I actually kind of like. And so I like this horse underneath. I could see this horse making a nice progression second off the layoff, and that was a lengthy layoff from July till February. So you were looking at a 7-month layoff, comes back, wins a pretty expensive optional claimer and at Gulfstream, and so I think if you're, like I said, if you're going deep on exotics like a trifecta, I throw the 5 in there. I think it's worth a shot.
Okay, we get to the Gazelle. Matt, we're gonna go 1 mile and an eighth in here, and not a lot of people have been mentioning Venti Valentine in that top tier group with the the really nice 3-year-old fillies, but she got a big figure when she won the Busher. She's the heavy favorite in this race. Well, what do you think about Venti Valentine? We saw another nice filly today. This could be a very strong edition of the Oaks, right?
Yeah.
I know where you are. You're in the Kathleen O corner. So,
but I think this comes down to, you're right. So what we're talking about today is that performance that Nest put on down at Keeneland in the Ashland, and that was a dominant effort, 8.5 length victory. And so just incredibly classy. And of course, this is a horse that just barely nudged out Venti Valentine a couple of races back. So, you had one horse that barely lost to Nest, who showed the class today. Yep. You have another horse right next to her in Classy Edition, who finished just behind Kathleen O last time out, who's the other kind of super filly. So, I hate to, in our mornings, we always try to beat chalk. But when you look at this race, it's kind of hard to get around some of these horses.
When I told Caleb and we were looking and I sent him the list of races, he was like, man, that's a lot of races we're going to go through. I said, unfortunately, like half of them are kind of unbettable, because it's just, they're nice horses, right? This is what happens in good graded stakes races, because these are horses now who are kind of making their final preps or their tune-ups, because we all know what next month is. It's not only the Derby and the Oaks, it's a weekend where a lot of horses have major prep races. There are a ton of grade ones. There are a ton of graded stakes that horses are pointing to, or either going to start their year or having their prep now to get ready for that. So this weekend could be a little chalky around, from place to place. And
I'll just say, for Classy Edition, this is a horse that was, coming off a layoff when running in that Devona Dale down at Gulfstream against Kathleen O. You would expect to see a nice progression coming out of that race. Obviously is going to have to progress from a speed figure standpoint to compete with Venti Valentine, who I thought made a really significant leap in that Busher Invitational last time out.
Didn't run poorly today,
No.
He was third in that race.
Right. No, Cocktail Moments we talked about this morning, actually.
You talked about. That was your horse. Give yourself a little credit.
No, that was
second. Just missed the bob.
Yeah, that was one of my few good stable duel plays today at Keeneland. And so but that was so that race came back nicely. Again, I just it might just be your flavor. You know, are you a bigger believer in Nest or bigger believer in Kathleen O?
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting how those horses actually may influence more about what you think of this race than maybe the two that were racing against each other.
That's
a little
funny.
bit.
It's a great point. Yeah.
So I lean maybe a little bit towards Classy Edition just to get a little bit more value. But it's hard to go against what you've seen with Venti Valentine, because she can do the distance no problem. And like I said, that Butcher Invitational was a really impressive effort. And if she builds on that, then I think it's kind of academic.
Yeah, Caleb, there's not a lot of speed on paper in here. And I guess it's Venti Valentine who might like naturally be one of the quicker. Maybe it's because the way that the pick 4 stacks up and some of the races are. I don't know how good this horse is, but I think the two might be able to get aggressive at least and give me a little run for my money. I mean, we talk about Kathleen O as like a measuring stick. She was right there with Kathleen O in her debut. She came back and won impressively. And then her last start, it was maybe one of those where she just kind of didn't get to the lead, didn't get the trip she wanted and backed up. I'll throw her in some exotics. Who are some of the horses you're looking at in this race, Caleb?
Yeah, you went exactly where I was looking.
Right?
Gratitude, I think. Is she this good? I don't know, but she should get the right trip. And that sometimes that makes up for some deficiencies in talent elsewhere. She was only beaten, as you pointed out, on neck to Kathleen O in her debut over and off track. That was a pretty productive maiden race. She came back and won her maiden pretty impressively next out. I don't know what happened in the Forward Gal. She just didn't really show up that day. Maybe she's a horse that kind of needs the lead, needs to be more forwardly placed. I'm not sure. But, I'm willing to give her a pass at 15-1 in a race that doesn't really have any speed. So I'm really
She's
with you.
Come back, and what's nice is since then, she came back a few weeks later, been training steadily. Doesn't look like she's missed any time in in the tab or anything like that. And it feels like a good spot for her. Yeah,
it does.
15-1, you can get a good run for your money. At least these are the kind of long shots where, she's light on speed figures and stuff, and maybe she needs to hop up, but you're getting a price. It's built in. You're going to be getting value here with her. The other horse who, gosh, I liked her a lot at Fairgrounds was Divine Huntress. She's one of these horses that you see that is so talented. Her Parks race is the one that I want to show because she's just like green and gangly, but she's super talented. You can tell she's got a lot of ability, and she's the 5 in this race at Parks. And this race was back on, where are we? January the 19th. And she ends up winning this race by 12. And she's just, you can even tell right here, she's like jumping around, she's just kind of goofy and green and just figuring things out. The horse outside of her puts her in sort of a weird spot, so they got to take a hold of her and stuff. So, she doesn't really seem like she's enjoying some of the kickback there. She's kind of jumping, and she's one of these horses that we've seen, at Parks, or sometimes, they'll come from Laurel, or not necessarily the top tracks, and they'll be a little under the radar, and then they can move into a barn-like motion. She took a lot of money in the Rachel Alexandra that day. She was only 6.5-1. And, she's not getting like a great trip or anything here. They're not going all that fast. Parks is more of a speed favoring type track. She's towards the back of the pack and she's wide. And once they just sort of ask her for anything, she just kind of swoops up. And her race last time out, she didn't really have, it says bothered at Fairgrounds. That wasn't really she wasn't really bothered, honestly. She kind of loomed up and then just sort of stopped. She was wide. Wasn't a great trip. I mean, she just blasted this field. Yeah. And it was one of those like, wow, this horse has something. If she's a price, she's the type of horse who I can make an excuse for, and maybe I can make a case for, because it does feel like there's something there. And you see right here, she's just goofy, her ears are up. She looks great. She's just kind of shifting around a little bit, and then she strides on pretty nicely. So she's one that I don't know if this is the right spot for her, because like we said, there's not that much speed on paper, but she's at least on my radar for races throughout the year, because there's something here with her. So even one for some of you folks who are watching now to keep an eye on for the big races that remain throughout the year.
And Gino, to your point about, those secondary tracks sometimes producing and having horses that are underestimated, today at Keeneland, we saw a horse, Old Homestead, who, went off at about 20-1, if I'm not mistaken, in the one stakes race.
Yep.
And that was a horse that had dominated at Delta Downs, but people kind of scoffed a little bit and said, well, how good is this horse really from Delta Downs? Only had ever run 5 furlongs, and you go, well, this horse is winning by, 6-7 lengths with ease. Like, this is not a bad horse and was posting respectable speed figures, but you got a huge price. Yep. Because people discounted the fact that it came from a track that didn't necessarily have the name recognition that, Churchill or Gulfstream or some of the bigger tracks had. So you can absolutely catch a price on those types of horses in these races.
Okay, let's anything else to mention, fellas, before we move to the Bayshore? Let's get
good.
Yeah, let's get to the Bayshore and close out Aqueduct. We're going to head on over to Santa Anita next. If you want to follow along with us, we're going to look at Santa Anita races 4, 6, 7, and 10. If you put them all together, it'd probably be about one race. So, actually, to be fair, they did a pretty good job tomorrow with the way they stacked the Santa Anita card, because they wanted to pump the late pick 5. So they put all of the best betting races in the late pick 5. They put a lot of the stakes races early, and I think so that way there's some national TV shows that are going to have a lot of the stakes all together. So they're a little earlier from Santa Anita, a little later from Aqueduct, and then at Keeneland also. We get to race number 11 here. This is the Bayshore. The horse who, intrigues me, Witt returns for his 3-year-old season. He's going to be making his debut. I got a good score with Life is Great, a few starts back. This horse made some money winning at 15-1. I thought the 6 Highly Respected's debut win was pretty good. We can pull it up here and watch. And, Brad Brown trains this horse. This isn't a horse they would throw into a spot, that they wasn't ready. They could go into a different spot here. So we're looking at Highly Respected, who I believe was the 6 in this race.
Yeah, 6 race.
Yeah, the 6 in this race, and was the 6 in the same race that we're looking at here from Aqueduct. So Highly Respected sits in a good spot, ends up kind of working out that nice trip, sitting in 3rd, and then kind of moves up to 2nd. But what I thought was pretty impressive about this race is the 4 sneaks away. The 4 here isn't getting a whole ton of pressure, and the rest of the field is kind of spiraling. And it looks at this point like the 4 is gone. The 6 is really needing to get to work. And just the way that this race ended up, playing out, having to run down a loose on the lead horse like this, the winner, the horse Actualize, had racing experience too. And Highly Respected collared this horse pretty easily. As soon as they loomed up next to them, you could see they really got determined and really dug in here. Start to drift out a little bit, but then you're going to straighten up. And I thought stride on pretty nicely here. The runner-up was the one that had experience. The 4th place finisher came out of this race to win and went over to Tampa, earned a 95 buyer speed figure in winning the race that day. That was fluid situation. So races come back live. I like the way it looked visually. Ran down a loose on the lead horse. You got a good barn. I think the way the race shapes up too, you probably got Dean's List. Dr. Jeff will probably be forwardly placed. Outkiss, you'd imagine, is going to be close up. And probably, Scaramouche, we'll be right there. From Another Mother, I don't know if it's as fast as some, but with the inside draw, also going to have to go. I'm on Highly Respected here. Maybe it's because I was a highly motivated fan from last year, Caleb. So I want to go in that direction too. This horse reminds me a little there. What are you thinking in the Bayshore?
Yeah, well, I definitely have a lot of respect for Highly Respected, but I sort of looked at this race, and this was kind of pretty much the only race in the sequence where I wasn't totally enamored with the favorite.
Sure.
I think Dean's List is a nice horse. I don't think he's significantly better than a number of other runners in here, and he's going to be quite short, I think, when he post time comes around. Not only that, but I think there's a bunch of horses that want to run the exact same race he wants to, which is to go fast early and get the lead. I mean, there's probably From Another Mother, Dr. Jeff, Dean's List, a horse like Scaramouche. I mean, there's probably 5 or 6 horses that do their best running on or just off the lead here. So I'm not really enamored to go and bet a horse like Dean's List. Rosario is not my favorite full send jock in the country, as much as I do love him on a good closer. So I was looking for a horse to come off the pace. I love your pick and Highly Respected. I think that horse makes a ton of sense. I thought that was a very nice race in his maiden. I went a little bit to the outside here. And I took a long, hard look at Witt, but I think he's also going to be short. And I'd like to see us start off the layoff before I'm really willing to go back and support him. I'd like to see him get out of the gate without falling down first. So I actually ended up on the 10. Life is great.
I know he's absolutely be using this horse in any late exotics and any pre-cores, but
he's not really a closer, right? But he did show a new dimension last out when he sat off the pace and he passed a couple of horses. He didn't have the cleanest of trips that day. He was 50-1, but there was a length that separated him and Dean's List in a race that pretty much held together on the front end.
Yep.
And one of those horses is going to be a fairly short second price and on the board, and one of them is going to be 6 or 8-1. So I think Life is great. If he can just avoid getting caught up in an early pace battle and get to relax a little bit, I really think he gets the right trip and might just be good enough.
Yeah, and what's nice about him, the same exact pattern resulted in his maiden win. When he cut back from 1 mile and a 16th to 7 furlongs, he crushed that day, and he sort of sat nicely, right? He was close up, but now we've seen that he can sit a little bit farther off. I think turning back, he'll be a little bit more off the pace. And mainly, he's just not as fast as some of the other rivals in here. So he ends up working out a nice trip from out there. He's in all of the exotics for me, too. Life is great. Matt, who are some of the horses you want to use in this final race on the card at Aqueduct on Saturday?
Yeah, so like Caleb, I also I really liked Witt last year in a few of those races at Saratoga, and he was able to kind of just naturally with his speed, was able to overcome some just terrible breaks early on. But I need to see more professionalism out of him, coming back from this layoff. Also, some of those races that he was in towards the end have not come back particularly strong. So Command Performance is still waiting to break his maiden. We've not really seen Gunnet in about 6 months. And so, Jack Christopher's obviously been on the bench with the shin surgery. So, that those races have not necessarily been quite as strong of a predictor. And at 2-1, I don't like that price. So Gino, like you, I actually went to the 6, highly respected. And I'm not just copying you because I posted this earlier today. And so I just think this horse makes a lot of sense as well. I think I like that we're only stepping up enough furlong. I like that we're going from 6 to 7. We're not, going into a mile or a 2-turn race. So it's a modest increase in distance. I just think you're getting a little bit of value at 4-1 at least. Like both of you, I think Dean's List is a nice horse, but I'm not overwhelmed by Dean's List, and certainly is going to get bet down because of the connections, etc. Chad Brown and Manny Franco, it should be pointed out, maybe is not as prolific of a combination as the Ortiz brothers, but those two are teaming up to win 41% of the time at Aqueduct this year. So that's a pretty profitable combination with almost a $3 ROI. So I like the 6 in this race.
Highly respected. To close it out at Aqueduct on Saturday, the Wood Memorial Kentucky Derby points on the line in New York. Said Santa Anita, but I guess it would make more sense if we go to Keeneland, right? If we're going in order, we'd be silly that. So let's go over to Keeneland. We'll go to Keeneland next. We'll hit races 7, 8, and 9 from Keeneland, and we'll pull those up.
We need to get like a little graphic of like our bus or something like that traveling across the country.
Where in the world are we? The Carmen San Diego,
Exactly.
Such a fantastic game, really great game. So race number 7, we're going to look at races 7, 8, and 9. We're looking at the Grade 1 Madison. We'll take a look at a turf sprint, the Shakertown, and we will look at the Toyota Bluegrass with Kentucky Derby points on the line there. So race number 7, the Grade 1 Madison. Caleb, we got Kamari, last year's winner of this, as the heavy favorite in here. This does kick off the late pick 5. So what's sort of your thoughts on this race, and then how you're looking at it from a betting approach?
Yeah, so I think this is a fun race. There's a lot of ways you can go here. I mean, there's going to be people that just absolute single to Kamari. There's going to be people that absolutely toss Kamari. There's going to be people that spread and include. So there's a lot of ways you can go in this race. So I think it's a fun race to look at. My opinion is I respect Kamari, but I feel like she's always overbet relative to my interpretation of how talented she is.
I agree.
I mean, she was 1-9 last time in a 5-horse field and beat a bunch of nothings. I mean, yeah, she won this race last year and she beat Bell's the One. That was a nice race, but even in that race, she was 3-5. And I just don't think she's that talented, and she's going to be overbet once again, just given the connections and the perfect record on dirt and at Keeneland and whatever else. So for me, I actually do have a horse I love in here and would probably feel pretty comfortable singling in most of my wagers. And that's, I guess, the second choice, or maybe third. Yeah, second choice on the board, which is the number 3, Lady Rocket. I think this horse is just extremely talented. She ran an absolute hole in the wind last out in the go for wand handicap at Aqueduct. I mean, she posted a monster time form figure of 125. I mean, that wins pretty much any grade 1 in the country at this level. So I wasn't sure she could get the distance, and I felt pretty foolish after watching that. I think the turn back hits this mare right between the eyes. I mean, she likes Keeneland. She likes the distance. If they get the weather that they're calling for, I mean, she's already proven that a sloppy track isn't a problem for her. And she's likely going to be, on the lead in a race where I don't think she'll have everything her own way. But the other speeds in here do feel a little bit cheap. I mean, Scylla shipping up from Delta, and then the 10-horse Tis Splendid News. Just not really sure that she's quite as talented. I don't know where that last race came from.
And
but for me, I think Lady Rocket is the horse to beat.
Can sit a little bit. You probably don't want her to. She's fast, but she's shown she can come from up. You have to go so far back to find anytime she's done something wrong or she hasn't run well. And, she lost to Bella Sofia in a race where she missed a break and she was in a tough spot there chasing. This is a nice animal. This Lady Rocket here. Super talented. And, if you're looking to go against Kamari, who is going to take a lot of money, it's not a bad direction to go. Matt, you and I this morning both talked about, from a stable duel standpoint, Just One Time.
Yeah. So I think from a stable duel perspective, Just One Time is a really intriguing horse. I think horse to maybe include an exotic. So if you do like a Lady Rocket up top, I would pair Just One Time, in an exacta box or something along those lines. This is another horse that we know likes the slop from her time running in Penn National. Those are typically less than ideal conditions running at Penn National, having grown up in that area. I know that. And so, and this is a horse that's made kind of a pretty significant rise from running in those, running in those allowance races at Penn National to being a grade 2 winner last time out. I just think there's kind of going to be some natural progression there. Brad Cox's barn, as always, is firing off winners. You get Flavian Prat aboard now. So I think this is a horse that just always seems to be there, should get, I think, a pretty nice trip, doesn't need the lead or anything along those lines. So should be able to sit behind the pace. I'm kind of skeptical about Bell's the One in terms of the trip that she's going to be able to carve out. And then Lady Rocket, if she runs that last race, it's over. I mean, so we'll see. I mean, it's a little bit of a layoff, obviously, about 4 months. Obviously, the works look tremendous coming back, and another Cox runner. So I could see Cox going 1-2 in this race.
The other horse that we haven't mentioned that I just worth mentioning, I'll probably throw in a few spots, is Four Graces. We talked about her this morning also with Barry on the stream. Her 2 back race, she was right there with Just One Time, and she was kind of in between and didn't have the smoothest of trips. And she's got ability. She just seems like she hasn't quite stepped forward, and maybe even kind of regressed a little bit from her best, which was kind of towards the end of her middle to end of her 3-year-old season. But she is capable of winning a race like this. And she can get the kind of trip. She's got multiple dimensions to her. She can show some speed. She can sit off a little bit and pass horses. She's won at Keeneland. She shouldn't have an issue getting the distance. So there will at least be 1 or 2 tickets and multi-race exotics that I have the 7 Four Graces in the mix there. That is the Madison, the grade 1 Madison, race number 7 at Keeneland on Saturday. Matt, let's get on over to the Shakertown. Mm-hmm. We've got a 5.5 furlong turf sprint. And, oh, man, this guy gets me every time, this Golden Pal. He gets me every time, Golden Pal. Always trying to beat him. He is a 5-time winner now. He's won, I think, 5 consecutive races. Your Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint winner back in November. So does have a layoff to deal with. And he does have a legitimately fast, older horse, seasoned, good, one of the top turf sprinters out there right now, just might right next door. So it won't be easy for him.
No, it won't. And we made a joke this morning, if Golden Pal breaks like he did at the Breeders' Cup, then it's kind of over before it starts. I mean, I've rarely seen a horse break so well and be open lengths clear of the rest of the field within 120 yards. I mean, it's just incredible. So, an incredible first step into ability to get out. Just Might's last race is a little bit concerning for me. I mean, that horse really flattened out and kind of faded down the stretch and was caught by a long shot Pyron at the wire. So that was a little concerning. So I just think if Just Might if they do get into a little bit of a speed duel, I think the 11 probably fades. I think it's more likely that the 11 fades than Golden Pal. And I like, if you're going to try to beat Golden Pal, I actually look to a horse that's beat Golden Pal before, which is the 6th, the Learjet, which is coming off a real long layoff. I think this is a nice stable dual play as well. 12-1, only going to cost you $750 in that game. We talked about it this morning, but it's a horse that, beat Golden Pal during their juvenile season back in 2020. And kind of went into a little bit of a slump after that, and then came over to Brendan Walsh's barn, made his debut at Kentucky Downs, and won the Grade 2 Franklin Simpson with pretty impressively, but has been on the shelf since then. So is coming back. Walsh has a nice record in terms of winning at a 24% clip when bringing horses back from that long of a layoff. So I do think the barn's going to fire, and I just think this horse also might carve out a pretty nice pace, or a pretty nice setup, sitting behind some early speed.
Caleb, I think this is a good race for all bettors, because you either like Golden Pal and you can just think Golden Pal's so good and single and move along. If not, you probably aren't a fan of Just Might with that pace, and then anyone else is a pretty good price. So I think, whichever way you stack it up, it's either like, okay, I'm going to make this a free space and turn a pick 5 into a pick 4. Or we can say, hey, there are going to be a lot of 8, 10, 15-1 shots that could really get the right kind of trip if those two horses on the outside hook up.
Yeah, you're completely right. It's a great race, no matter what your opinion is. As long as you have somewhat of an opinion, it's a great race. You probably don't want to use Golden Pal with a couple of others, but whether you single him, key him on top, or toss him, I think that it's a good betting race. So for me, they kind of say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. I've bet against Golden Pal in pretty much every start of his career. Yep. And
throw us in the loony bin, Caleb. Let's go.
So there's still room on the Golden Pal hate train. If anyone wants aboard, I'm the conductor, and I'm not going to change my opinion now. I may be wrong, but I'm never in doubt. Golden Pal is a nice horse, but I'm going to go elsewhere. With the horse Just Might, I'm not interested in this horse at all, but I think he might do enough to soften up Golden Pal a little bit. Yep. But if you're a figures guy, Golden Pal has one race that's fast enough to make him 4-5 in this race, and that's only his Breeders' Cup effort that kind of came out of nowhere. His form backs it up, but his numbers don't. So there's really two horses I want to talk about here outside of Golden Pal. The one who I think I like the best is the number 3, Barraza. I'll be the first to admit I'm not a big fan of West Coast turf horses that ship east most of the time. The one huge caveat to that is in sprints. I think the West Coast turf sprint division is every bit as strong as the East Coast, if not a little bit stronger, just given the way that speed tends to carry, and a lot of these East Coast turf sprinters tend to be more off the pace runners. We saw Lieutenant Dan and Charmaine's Mia, 2 West Coast invaders, run 2-3 right behind Lieutenant Dan last out. Yep. They're very nice horses. And I think that Barraza, ever since that Vladimir Sarin realized that he has a sprinter and not a router on his hands, this horse has been a completely different animal. He's undefeated, essentially going around one turn here on the turf anyway, since going into the Sarin barn. He's won his last 4 starts, and he's won them impressively in as many different ways, forms, and fashions as you could ask for. He closed from last in his last start while going down the hill. He wired a flat 6. He can do it all. He's overcome traffic. He's going to probably get a more off the pace trip here, I would think, with the likes of Golden Pal and Just Might, especially with Leparoux taking them out here. He's definitely a more patient rider. So he's going to need to work out a trip with a bunch of horses to his outside. But I've been really impressed with Barraza, and that's definitely a horse that I would probably dub as my top pick here.
Yeah, I'm going to play this race in multis just trying to beat Golden Pal. And I think in doing that, it's really nice to be able to dive into 3 or 4 horses, that are like those type of prices. Both of the 2 horses that you mentioned. And I didn't even show the form of Barraza here, who as Caleb was talking all about Barraza here. Nice job. What a it's like, I remember my first beer. It's the first time I've done this, right? Jeez, come on. Terrible job, Gino, hosting the stream. The 4 Diamond Oops and the 5 Gear Jockey are also going to be on my radar. It seems like at this point, Diamond Oops' best races are sprinting. I think when you really can dive into and see the ones where he seems to show up with the best effort, I think he has just a little bit more punch sprinting. And with Gear Jockey, you can toss his last two. And for him, when you dig into his form and you see the type of horse that he was, because what I love about turf sprinters, and Caleb, you were kind of hitting on it, when you find these races, it's really fun to see the career arcs of a lot of these horses, because they don't usually just start out and like, oh, we're a turf sprinter, right? No, because that's one of those niche things where nobody really wants to type, but there's nothing wrong with being an awesome turf sprinter and just like knowing where you fit, because you go like long on the grass, or maybe you'll go short in sprints, and then you'll kind of, figure out exactly where you fit. Gear Jockey is one that when you dive into his form, so he seemed like he was a little bit better going longer, and they found out, yeah, he's pretty good at about a mile. So I don't think the races going 5 are even very good for him, just with the shape that they're running. I think it's just a little bit too quick, a little bit too short. Once you get to 5.5, 6, and anything maybe in the 6.5-ish range, like down the hill at Santa Anita would fit a horse like this perfectly, But I think that 5 might just be a tad short for him. Now you get the second start off the bench. And yeah, he was defeated by Golden Pal, but that was in a race when Golden Pal cleared. If we're projecting this race to have more speed, he's the type of horse I'm looking for to benefit from, from a trip like that. So the 2 horses you guys mentioned, honestly, I would be 3, 4, 5, and 6 in my exotics trying to beat Golden Pal on the win end. And just hoping that Golden Pal and Just Might hook up. Like, I like this 9 a little bit, but I think I want to see a race first. Like, I'm sure there's some ability here. And the race at Woodbine was impressive, but I hate – this horse was off for 2 years, came back, ran a bang-up race, and now it's been off for 10 months. I don't – that's not never really a positive for me with that. But I wouldn't be surprised to see this horse run well, and then maybe keep an eye on them for a big race, Kentucky Derby or Kentucky Oaks weekend in about a month when they go second start off the bench. Anything else to mention in the Shakertown, Maddie?
Nope. It's funny. I also had Barraza underneath in my pick. So that was my Golden Pal, the Learjet, and Barraza were my top 3. So everything Caleb said, I absolutely agree with. This horse is just, looking great the last 4 times out and should get a perfect trip.
So we are going to –
I got to throw in one little comment here. Before, I know I hate to talk about every horse in the race.
No, but, please do.
I have a genuine argument.
We don't have that many to talk about, so please.
I have a genuine argument for the 2 horse here at 50 to 1.
I actually mentioned this horse as a crazy horse. Please go ahead. Yes.
I mean, this horse maybe should be the longest price on the board, or one of them, but I cannot fathom why he should be 50 to 1
in
this race. If you watch either of his last 2 races, his last race is the one that I watched most recently. This horse closes so fast, and that run style just does not work at Gulfstream 5 furlong turf sprints 99% of the time. I mean, speed overwhelmingly dominates Gulfstream turf sprints.
This horse drew the rail in this race, was the number 1 here.
He's the one horse in this race. He kind of loses contact with the field.
Spot. You're in the worst spot to possibly be in this type of a race.
Right. And if you look at the horses who are out in front of him, I mean, Into the Sunrise, Sheki Shabazz, Gretzky, these are nice turf sprinters.
Yeah. This is not a bad field at all. And
he falls out of the picture here.
Yeah. Caleb, I agree with you. I'm absolutely, because in this race, if you are playing and your approach is going to be hey, I don't like Golden Pal, you're looking for a crazy horse or 2 like this. Throw this horse into at least a pick 3, because if this horse shocks the world and pays $100, me and Caleb are going to be mad that we told you. We're going to say it. We're going to puff our chests out on social media for a long time, folks. You're going to have to mute us. I promise.
I'll get T-shirts, I'm making hats made. I mean, it's going to be obnoxious.
Flies home late. That's a pretty easy kind of geared down win too.
I mean, he knew he had it at the 16th pole, and he starts backing off.
Yeah.
I mean, he needs to improve, but I don't see why he can't. He's going to get a hot pace.
You got a little step forward at the beginning, the first start of this year, then a nice little step forward there. If this horse, if they figured it out, and now they take one more step forward, and you've got a speed figure in like the middle to high 90s, that's right with what it would take to get this group. Like in any turf sprint, you're going to have to work out a trip, but could you see someone like Lannery saving all the ground and making one run? How many times have we seen it?
Yeah.
That's a good sniff. I'm glad you mentioned that horse, Caleb. At the very least, an under horse. If
Absolutely.
some of you, especially if some of you are going to go the opposite, right? And maybe you're like, I'm going to play Golden Pal on top of a bunch. Throw this horse in at least in the second and third spots, because this is a horse who has a shot to make some noise at 50-1. Let's get to the Bluegrass.
And costs you a whopping $0 in Stable Duel.
That's right.
Stable Duel, you're a freebie. I actually hear they give you the points back.
Sure, they should give you more money.
You this is $55,000 to spend in your salary cap instead of the 50. So let's move along to the final race that we're going to talk about from Keeneland, a Kentucky Derby points race, a prep race, the Bluegrass here. Caleb, from just a quality standpoint, Zandon and Smile Happy both feel like serious, legitimate Kentucky Derby contenders if they were to run well in here. They're both going to be making their second start of the season, so we can expect improvement from the both of them. I don't think either one of them would be a shock. You've got Emmanuel, who had a pretty troubled trip last time out, and the Florida races have come back very solid and competitive. So, I mean, at least from a talking point with those three, another one of the preps that we're talking about where there are multiple pretty talented horses to where if any of them won impressively, they'd be right in the top tier with the top betting choices.
Yeah, absolutely. This is another year where in the past, I think it's been fair to say the Bluegrass hasn't always been the strongest prep either. When you compare it to something like the Santa Anita Derby or the Florida Derby or even the Arkansas. But this year, I think that the Bluegrass is pretty strong. I think that there's probably three horses that I would say have a pretty strong chance. The three that you mentioned, essentially being Zandon, Smile Happy, and Emmanuel. None of those three would surprise me in here, and none of those three would surprise me to run well in the Kentucky Derby should they get the points to get in. I think that they're three very talented colts. I think Smile Happy, I mean, maybe starting with him as the favorite, he's kind of been the horse ever since his 2-year-old. I mean, he opened up the futures pool as the favorite along with all other 3-year-olds. He's always been well supported. And to me, I mean, I know he was beaten by Epicenter in the Risen Star last out, but he really looked like a horse that just kind of needed a race. I mean, McPeak was on the record saying he wasn't totally cranked. The goal was to have, 2 starts and go to the Derby here. So I don't think that if you like Smile Happy going into that race, I don't think there's any reason to be put off or to not back him here. I mean, Epicenter, we know, is a nice horse. He went on to run very impressively in the Louisiana Derby. And I think Smile Happy, I mean, if he takes any improvement out of that Risen Star, I think he's going to be a handful here and, again, wherever he shows up. So I think he's a deserving favorite in this spot.
Is the anti-Breeders' Cup Juvenile. This is the race that's come back super live with everyone having a really nice 3-year-old season so far and winning big 3-year-old races, whereas we see that Breeders' Cup Juvenile race. And I can pull that one up because the one Command Performance was in that race. And, and that's what you look at the field. There are some horses that you felt like were going to be pretty good. I mean, Giant Game was only making his 3rd start in that race. He's come back really disappointing. Papa Cap hasn't looked great. Command Performance, he couldn't even break his maiden. We didn't see much from Olivia Class. Pinehurst hasn't been all that impressive. He was nowhere to be found in the UAE Derby there. So, comparing 2 key races in November for these 2-year-olds last year, and this race, nobody's come out and run well. And, Matt, the one that we were just looking at, everyone's run well. It's really funny to see how races can be key like that.
Absolutely. And Smile Happy's been, to Caleb's point, kind of the leader in the clubhouse, it feels like, using a golf analogy on Masters Friday. It is, has been, kind of been that money. I mean, Mattress Mac and everybody's putting money on Smile Happy and all that stuff. But it's, I agree with Caleb. I mean, there's nothing in that race that was bad. I think the way I approach this race is not that I dislike certain horses. I'm not necessarily tossing some of the favorites as much as I may just prefer one of them over another. And so I prefer Emmanuel, and I know you do too. I mean, we talked about it this morning. I just think one of the things we've seen from these Derby prep races, and I'm not breaking news here, is early speed is critical. Hey, Pete Aiello. And so it's one of those things where Emmanuel just had.
So not to interrupt, but just so we're watching and then you keep talking. Emmanuel's the 8 in here. that we're watching on the replay.
I mean, Emmanuel is going to be halfway to Key West by the time the time this race is over. I mean, his horse had an incredibly wide trip.
And what's funny at Gulfstream, it looks deceiving.
Yes.
You're like, oh, my horse is like 3 or 4 wide. And then you see the head on, you're like, oh my gosh, they were in the 6 or 7 path.
Yes. I remember kind of being like not alarmed, but like shocked by that when they did go to the head on. And I was like, oh, wow, he's a lot further out than I realized. And so just had a really poor race and had every reason to kind of give up, but didn't and kind of fought on. And he's a horse that I was kind of not particularly high on going into this race. And I was actually impressed by him in this defeat. Obviously, Simplification went back to run very strong in the Florida Derby, finished a close third. So I think Emmanuel's a horse that will get on. There's not a ton of speed in this race. And so I think Emmanuel is a horse that can absolutely kind of get on the lead or sit right off of it. And that's been the winning recipe in all of these Derby preps, whether you're looking at a horse like Classic Causeway, those races at Tampa, whether you're looking at early voting in the Withers, whether you're looking obviously out at Santa Anita and Forbidden Kingdom, whether you're looking at White Barrio, sitting kind of a stalking trip and doing this. So I just think it's less so I'm down on Smile Happy because I kind of have a hard time maybe getting past these 3 favorites with Zandon in there as well. But I just think Emmanuel might have the better trip and might just have enough to hold it off.
He was trying. He was up into second here, and then he has every right to get just a little bit tired because of that trip. He was a little wide. I wouldn't be shocked to see them get more aggressive with him because of that. They don't want to. They're going to make sure, okay, we don't want to miss the break. We don't want to be a little far and hooked wide. So I think they're going to go, and there's not that much speed.
There really isn't. That's the thing. Right? There's not a ton of speed in this race. I mean, I know we talked about, are they going to send Command Performance from the inside? Yeah, maybe Fenwick. I mean, that was kind of, he was a bit of an anomaly last time out.
Has some speed. Like Trademark's best races have come when on the lead, and maybe he wasn't quite as fast as Classic Causeway, so maybe they'll try again here to get just aggressive. But it does. I said I'm not going to bet him to win or anything, but I would not be shocked if this horse runs better than anyone's going to give him credit for, because why would we want to give him credit coming off of that maiden race when he was so disappointing and when everybody in the race that he faced last year has come back and run poorly? But if he's just a really big price, it's one of those weird feeling things where it's like, I got a feeling that there's a race or two that this guy's got that he might still have a little more upside, because maybe he didn't peak last year when some of these other horses were above him, and maybe he can still take a step forward with that, with that race under his belt. So the Bluegrass, Caleb, anyone else to mention in here?
I would just touch on Zandon a little more. I know we kind of glossed over him a bit.
Yeah, we did.
If I had to pick one, I would end up on Zandon, actually.
Yeah.
To me, it's a 1A, 1B between Zandon and Smile Happy.
They're nice.
Emmanuel's, he's a bit of a B to me. I mean, I respect Emmanuel. I do. And I completely agree with Matthew and Eugenio as well, that he probably does get the best trip of the big 3 in this spot. But for me, I mean, it's tough to really gauge that Fountain of Youth, because I thought a few others that were likely to pass him were compromised when Paco made that move and clipped heels and took a few horses out. And the prior 2 races to me were just, he kind of had everything his own way. So maybe he does get everything his own way. I'm not against him by any means. He's just more of a third pick for me. Sure. I thought Zandon probably had the worst trip in the Risen Star, where he kind of bobbled the break, hopped up at the start. He was wide on the track when Smile Happy got to stay closer to the rail and save more ground. And I thought that he also raced like a horse that probably just needed that start. I think there's more of a question about the distance with Zandon as opposed to Smile Happy, but he just missed by a nose to Mo Donegal, who we know is a respectable horse up at the Wood this weekend as well. So I think Zandon is the horse that I would probably want. And I guess I'm maybe showing my Chad Brown homerism a little bit, but Flavian Pratt's been riding well, and I would take Zandon on Saturday.
Yeah. Of everyone else that we haven't mentioned, the only one, if you're looking for a big price, I do think Ethereal Road is an underneath type horse. I don't think he's quite good enough as someone to win, but as far as getting a trip, passing some tired horses late, picking up some pieces, I could see that. We didn't mention Rattle and Road. I mean, he could take another step forward. Maybe
that's Sniper's horse, though, man. Barry likes Rattle and Roll.
I respect him. Yeah, like I can see why he where he steps, maybe I'm
Yeah.
not quite as high on him, but if he's 8-10 to 1, it's not like he's a short price horse. So I wouldn't talk you off him if you like him at
the blinkers coming on is interesting. I mean,
Mhm.
I'll be interested to see how forwardly placed he is. And he could carve out a decent trip. So we'll see.
Yeah. You know what I need to do? I mean, not like I unfortunately, I'm fortunately for myself, I'm not a big guy, so I've never really had to lose weight or anything like that. But if I ever did, this is what I need to do right now. Just turn the weather up to 100. If I'm sweating and dripping, fellas, I apologize. It was record-breaking temperatures in Long Beach, where I'm right across from the beach. So it's like, if it gets to 80, 85, it's hot. It is really hot over here. And we were at like 92 yesterday. I was like, oh, okay, 100 today in Long Beach, record in early April. So I'll take the heat over the cold and the snow. I won't complain there. But if I do look drenched, my apologies. It's a warm one here as we move over from the Bluegrass in Keeneland to Santa Anita Derby Day. And we aren't going to have the biggest fields in the world for a couple of these races. One of the races that we're going to talk about has a good size field where maybe we can get a little bit of value. But in race number 4, it's going to be the Santa Anita Oaks. What we're going to see, Caleb, in, some of these big prep races now is the horses that are being transferred from the Bob Baffert barn over to either Tim Yakteen or other trainers. So we'll see, how are these horses going to perform now? And some of these horses that need points because they've been running in races, they've been winning, but they haven't been able to accumulate those points. They're probably the horses to beat, but they're in sort of a pressure spot, right? Like, a lot of things can happen in a horse race. You could get in some trouble. You could, something can happen where the jock, you could spill the rider, right? You could, like, lots of reasons why a horse who on paper looks like a cinch doesn't cross the wire first, second, or even third sometimes. It'll really play into this weekend from a dynamic standpoint moving forward. And I think that's kind of what's made the trail this year feel a little bit more wide open, because until about a week ago, we didn't really know if some of these horses were even going to be able to run in the Oaks, in the Derby, in those big races.
Yeah, I think that's the key to really unlocking a lot of the, not just Santa Anita card, but the Derby preps in general. I don't know exactly what order this particular race falls in as it compares to the Wood or the Bluegrass or anywhere else, but I'm going to be paying very close attention to how these Bob Baffert refugee horses are actually running when they get to Tim Yakeen or Rudy Brissett or whoever else, to see if they still run like Baffert horses do, or as we've become accustomed to seeing them, or if they're going to lose a step or lose an edge a little bit. I don't know that we'll have that information at this point. They've made Adair Manor here 3 to 5 in the morning line, based on her last 2 starts. I think that's probably fair. I think for me, until I get the Baffert question answered, I'm not going to go bet a horse at 3 to 5 that's leaving the Baffert barn. That's too short for me. I know it's a short field. From a stable perspective, I'm definitely not touching this horse. Give me the other 4, honestly. But, even from a live bet perspective, I think that there's other horses here that at least interest me a little bit. Probably chiefly being the 2, Ain't Easy.
Okay, so this is the horse for me too, Caleb, because last year her 2 wins were awesome. And she went from 5.5 to 1 mile and a 16th, which is not easy to do at all. And she was nice that day. And she was going into the Breeders' Cup. She was probably going to be the 3rd choice in the juvenile fillies. And she got injured right before she had to miss the race. And so she was out of training for a while. She started making her return. And she came back in the March 6th race. And, talk a little bit more about Ain't Easy as I pull the race up. She's the 2 in here. And I thought this was a really good effort. I thought this was exactly what you'd expect from a horse coming off the bench and what you'd want to see. So she's the 2.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And that's exactly my thinking as watching her here. Is she showed that she's no worse for wear, that the injury she suffered after the Breeders' Cup has not been, a setback. She hasn't lost a step. She still has some early speed here. And again, she just looked like a horse that hasn't been out in 6 months and
kind of up on heels here, right? She's in it's a spot that's either good or bad, right? It's your saving ground, but now you're kind of you got to wait.
Yeah, it's never a spot that I want my 3-year-old filly in her 3rd career start to probably make.
Off the bench.
Off the bench, yeah. I'll trade places with a 9 10 times out of 10 in this
100%.
race.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's sort of where she's kind of got pushed back a little bit. You can tell she wants to go,
Sure.
She's
and
ready.
She's a horse that doesn't need the lead, but it's unclear that how much she really wants to take that kick back and be in behind horses and being tight against the fence either.
Yep. And you can tell that she doesn't like it. There's a distinct moment in the race where you're like, oh, yep, she doesn't like the lead. Even right there, you could see she kind of shied sort of away, because think about, like you said, she's young, just her 4th start. She's down on the inside. She's got pressure. She hasn't run in a while, and she had an injury. So maybe she's even a little bit skittish at the moment. So now there's a hole, and you're going to try to go down in there, but it's still a little bit tight. She's got some room, but now the 7 sort of comes back over, and you can see right here, she's like, let me get off the rail. Like, I just want to get off there. And she's trying to get out there. She just doesn't seem to like it.
She never gets clear here. She never gets outside.
And right now, again, you can see they even try here and pull her over late. So I thought this was like a sneaky good effort, where it's a tune-up race. She needed it. She had a little bit of that. It's not like overwhelming trouble or anything, but we said, if you flip trips, I take the opposite trip with the 9 over that trip any day of the week. From a gambling standpoint, I feel like it's her. And I mean, I've tried to make cases a couple times for the 1. Maybe I said this to my guest yesterday on the show, my podcast, Matt Chappie. If there's, I think of races sometimes in my head like this. If this race were run 100 times, there might be a few versions of this race where Adair Manor and Under the Stars, with different ownership groups, and the 2 Ain't Easy, all try to get forwardly placed in here. Ain't Easy's like, I don't want to get shuffled back or kind of behind, like I was last time out. And then I don't know how many versions, but at least some versions of this race where all 3 of those 3 go push each other. They're all worried about each other, not really thinking that anyone's going to pass them. And then the 1 just sits, and finally gets a pace scenario where she might be able to swoop. I don't know if she's that good, but that's the craziness of my mind. How it works.
No,
right?
I think, I actually like Desert Dawn underneath at that, at the Breeders' Cup. And so, where she finished, she I think she showed, some ability. And I think I had her underneath actually at the Chandelier, at the grade 2 before that, where she finished 3rd. So, I think that here's the thing though, is, and this is kind of the downside or upside, depending on whose perspective you're thinking on it from, of a 5-horse stakes race, is that you're not going to have the traffic that you would normally have in a bigger field.
True.
And so even if, I want to get to the lead, or, okay, so just move the horse outside a little bit. Like nobody should have a bad trip. Like nobody should be getting pinned inside, and, it's not going to be this, what we saw today at Keeneland, a lot of 12, 13, 14 horse races. So I think that's always been my concerns about how some of these West Coast horses will translate to the Kentucky Derby this year, when all you've been running against are 3 or 4 other horses, and it really ends up turning into like a 2-horse race a lot of times.
Yep.
I just go, how are you going to do on the first Saturday in May when you got 20 horses around you, and suddenly you can't carve out the perfect trip? So I also thought Ain't Easy makes a lot of sense here. If you're going to, just kind of hold off on making any assumptions about how the transition is going to take place between Baffert and Yakteen horses. That's it. I mean, if Adair Manor runs the way that she did last time out, then, she beat Microshare by 12 lengths. I mean, and Microshare is not a bad horse. We haven't really talked about that horse. That's a horse that should like more distance, but it's still pretty green and growing. So, I think from a betting standpoint, I'll probably go with the 2, if anything at all. But I think in some of these races, it may just be a wait and see mode for me.
We're not going to talk about this race, but I just want to say the name because I like this horse and I like this filly, Eleuthera. It's an island in the Bahamas. It's like, what is this name? I remember every time she ran, like the first time I looked it up. So anytime I can get a little chance to show off, I will.
I feel like you tipped that horse at Del Mar last summer at one point. I think I remember that.
Yeah, and she was a nice price, and she ran really well against Open Company a couple times. And you know what? She actually is in a pretty decent spot as far as there's just not a lot of pace in this race. She's going to go from the inside because the first time out of the box, I liked her, and then she came back and she ran in the I'm Smoking against the boys that day. They thought so much of her, they just threw her in a stakes race against the boys on the dirt. She came back and she sort of got caught in a blind switch here on December the 27th. And then she finally broke her maiden last time out, but she's got some ability and she might be able to get the lead. And I like being able to say Eleuthera. So that's also a positive. Santa Anita Derby, from a gambling standpoint, probably going to be a tough race. But Caleb, this is where a lot of the, new the Baffert horses transferring over into the Yakteen barn, we're going to really get a good sort of feel for them. There are 3 in this race. And, just from the way the race shapes up, you're looking at it like, okay, last time they tried to send Armagnac after Forbidden Kingdom, but it didn't work. He's not fast enough to keep up. So now they got to bring a sprinter in here, right? They got Taiba, who is actually on the lead sprinting. Hopefully this one is fast enough to at least soften up Forbidden Kingdom enough for Messier to sit right off. So it's just like, I feel like I'm watching like the boxing match. What was that boxing movie with James Woods where the guy's got to keep fighting guys over and over and over again? I feel like this is what's going on right now, right? It's like Forbidden Kingdom's going to be like having to deal with, boom, a shot early from the outside from Taiba. Then boom, here's Armagnac trying to maybe make a middle move into there. And then boom, here comes Messier. If Forbidden Kingdom can put them all away, have to deal with that one late. Sort of feels like he'll have to hold off all the Bafferts in here, right?
Yeah, I think that's he's going to have to be much the best in here. I think, and he might be, but I definitely think with 3 Baffert or pseudo Baffert horses in here that they're not going to let him get away with anything easy on the front end. I think my bigger question is, I'm not convinced they could really do anything about it. This horse is fast. I mean, he is fast. I didn't really love him in the San Felipe because while he has some stamina on the top of his pedigree, the bottom of that pedigree is all speed. There was no that dam and all siblings have been pure sprinters, but he clearly proved me wrong there. I don't know that there was anything really behind him in the San Felipe, which is maybe a question that's fair to ask. Doppelganger has not run well, and Happy Jack, I mean, he hasn't been out since, but nobody was within the same zip code of Forbidden Kingdom that day. But yeah, I think figuring out the pace here can be tricky. I mean, if you think a horse like Taiba is only in there to go, then you'd certainly be less interested in that horse on the win side, because you have to think that anybody that goes with Forbidden Kingdom is probably going to pay the price. So it's a tough call for me here. I think I do like Forbidden Kingdom. I mean, Messier is clearly the most well-meant of the Bafferts in this spot. So it's tough to get a read.
And here's Forbidden Kingdom clearing off. Caleb, you're really right. It's funny. And using another boxing reference, Matt, it's like Mike Tyson can come up to you and tell you that he's going to punch you in the face. It's like, what are you going to do about it? Right. Yep. It's like with a horse like Forbidden Kingdom, it's like, oh, hey, yeah, I'm going to go. You want to try to go? Let's see if you can.
Well, just to let's keep these boxing analogies going. So it's another one, which is everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. And, a little bit, there's a little bit of that, which is when you look inside, Caleb mentioned this in one of the earlier races, the Timeform US pace figures. And you look at the pace figures, even Taiba's, she's not anywhere. I mean, he's not anywhere near what Forbidden Kingdom's done from a pace standpoint. Yep. So I think that is, shout out to Tim G. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
For listening. And so, but I think Forbidden Kingdom is just that much better. And I think can, just get clear. And again, when you start digging inside those pace fractions and you start looking at how early, how fast these horses can go early, I just think, Forbidden Kingdom is kind of the clear choice here. And I don't think the Baffert runners can do much about it. And I also think, while Messier is, I agree with Caleb, the most well-meant, it's important to point out Messier ran huge at the last time out at the grade 3. But I mean, this is a horse that also lost to Slow Down Andy at Los Alamitos and was kind of posting mid 80s buyers figures, and then all of a sudden throws out a 103. And so we'll see, is this horse able to kind of come back and follow up with that 103 and build off of it? What I like about Forbidden Kingdom is this, he was running, progressing took some time off, came back, and has just clearly continued to develop as a horse and just keeps building on solid performances one after another. And so I like that just continual progression that we've seen from him.
Thanks for checking in with us, Tim. Caleb, I promise I was just showing the comment. I wasn't trying to cover your face. You look gorgeous like always today. I promise. So, yeah, I'm. This is one of the races from like a gambling standpoint where I'm not really going to be invested a whole lot here. You know, I'm going to be watching this race and very curious because this is an important race for what's going to happen in a month. And I'll be rooting for Forbidden Kingdom. I would love to see him with his speed and Mandela go to the Derby with a legitimate live threat. I always like the Derbies on paper that feel like they have 3 or 4 really fast horses. I want them to be honest. And I feel like that's how we get to know who some of the better horses really are. When they all can face each other, there's a lot of speed. It's not like, oh yeah, that horse just got the lead and was able to cruise. This year does feel, just thinking right now, there's a month to go, but like Matt, you were talking about, you start mapping out in your head the major contenders and you go, okay, at the center, okay, if Forbidden Kingdom were to win and get through, those two would be right towards the top. Okay, White Barrio is not one that wants to be too far out of it. And then think about some of the horses who are in the race behind him, if they're in, that are also quick early, that'll push the pace. The horses in New York that we were just looking at that aren't going to be all that slow. So could be fun. Could be,
and it always leads to a good call on the. I love going back and watching old Derby races and like Durkin just losing his mind over the half-mile fractions and just like they're going 45. This is insane, and you're just like, you know, that's good stuff. It's you know, Gino, it's like a wrestling. It's like Jim Ross, you know. Good God Almighty, you know. It's good wrestling. Yeah.
I want to ask. I know you guys both are in the Forbidden Kingdom camp, and I mean, I'm not really not with you either. But when I get a horse like this that he's already in the gate, we saw it with Epicenter, right? They rated hit Epicenter in the Louisiana Derby. He didn't need the points. He was talented enough to win anyway. I mean, do we think they try something different with Forbidden Kingdom to try to see if he has that throttle, or do they just let him do what he does best?
It's a good question. I've seen it, and I wouldn't be shocked because it's a great point, right? If you're Mr. Mandela, you go, okay, we know what we've got with the speed. Let's see if he can sit a little bit, and then we know we have options moving forward. If it doesn't work, who cares? We go to the Derby and we just send him hard anyways. I hope they don't, because I love horses that are like this, that are just really fast and that are just old school. And like we said, it's like, hey, try to come with him. And maybe it's going to be a day or two where it is your day and you do, but most days this horse is going to really make you regret trying to run early with him. So
that's interesting though, to Caleb's point, that would be kind of that would be a way of neutralizing the kind of the Yak team / Baffert strategy of going, okay, take the lead. Like, let's see what happens. Like, all right.
Is a horse like the horse to the outside, Caleb, all of a sudden kind of interesting. Like, what if Taiba can maybe get in front of Forbidden Kingdom? You know,
sure.
And then Forbidden Kingdom tries to sit, and that doesn't really work out. I never know what to do when a horse goes from 6 to 1 mile and 1/8. That's a lot to ask in a month, to go from 6 furlongs to 1 mile and 1/8 in just the second start. But I will say the race was nice, and it wasn't one of those really easy races where the horse just gets the lead or maybe sits right off of another horse from the outside. This horse was kind of in between and had to work, and it was a race that they may be able to get a lot out of. So I mean, I still think, to me, it's a 2-horse race probably between Messier and Forbidden Kingdom. If they rate him, if they don't, I'm not sure it's going to matter. Taiba's, my only opinion of Taiba is I'm going to be against that horse. I don't like the distance stretch out, like you mentioned. There's the whole Yak team factor. And I don't know if I believe the figure. I mean, if you look at some of the runbacks out of that race, it was full of first-time starters. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the second place horse, I don't know how you say that, Mauritius, he regressed like 30 points on time form. The third place and fourth place finisher both regressed about 10 points. 17 next time. I mean, these horses just didn't show up. Yeah. You know, so is it now the horse, to be Taiba's credit, you know, won by, what was it, 7.5 lengths. Yeah. So you can't knock her too much for horses that were 7 lengths behind, or him for horses that were 7 lengths behind him. But just something I'm a little skeptical of, if that race was quite as fast as it came up on Bayer in time form. Yeah. Yep. Race number 6, the Santa Anita Derby. Just tough to get to any of the bigger prices here for me. I guess of all of them, if you were looking for someone to complete stuff, Win the Day's race was nice. It was impressive, but this is just a lot to ask. And that was his first time on the dirt, first time going long. So you could see there being some upside. If they do go quick, maybe this horse can run second or third if the race falls apart. So that would be the one I look to as we look to race number 7 in the Royal Heroine. We have another small field in here and a really, really classy individual down on the inside, going global, grade 1 winner. She's going to be making her first start of the year. Last time we saw her was in the American Oaks, which it was a race that was taken off of the turf. So you can just put a line right through that race and that poor performance. And when you dig back into her form, Matt, she's a really nice going to be now 4-year-old filly. And it's really hard to knock what she's done in the last couple of years out here.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, really, just 1 second place at the San Clemente, and otherwise just a string of victories. Going, and it was going to like this distance, mile on turf. It's going to be perfect for her.
Yep.
So it's hard to get past this. Also, what I like about this horse is, and sometimes you see this with turf races, where horses are really deep closers, and certainly, she's got that ability, but more than anything, she's going to stay close. She's not going to fall that far back. I mean, she'll be a few lengths back, but she's not going to have a lot of ground to make up late. I think the inside rail also will make sure that she's, sitting comfortably and with such a small field. Again, kind of the point I made earlier, nobody's going to get a bad trip probably. So should be pretty close. I do, from a value standpoint, I actually like the 4 Park Avenue quite a bit.
Yeah. And if you're playing this race, that's the way you have to play it, right? If this horse is like 3-1 or so.
Yeah, I mean, if you 4-1 on the morning line, if you get anywhere near that, I think that's great. Obviously showed a lot of talent last time out, taking to the turf for the first time, just wired the field. This was a horse that was really impressing me on the dirt, and so the transition to the turf was particularly impressive. Won't have any issues with the distance, likes that mile distance, has won on that distance on the dirt before. The other horse that intrigues me, maybe as an underneath play, is Avenue de France, the 5 horse. That horse, if that horse is 18 lengths back like she was the last time out, I would be shocked. So she's going to be a lot closer. And so I think, she's got that incredible turn of foot. I just don't know how much speed she's going to have to run into. So she may be a little bit more pace dependent. But if you're looking to maybe fill out a trifecta with a little bit of value, maybe a 4-1-5 or something along those lines would be interesting.
Our friend Javonica will try to get some graded stakes.
Your friend Javonica.
my old friend Javonica. She'll try to get a graded stakes placing in here. Well, she'll be sitting second.
Yeah.
But Caleb, I mean, I think Park Avenue, at least on paper, she looks like she's the one to catch. She's the one that they'll have to run down, and she's cutting back from 1 1/8. I think we can look at her 2 races where, she got good. She won. She broke her maiden. She won really nicely at Los Al. Figures are a little bit light, and then she stepped up in the La Cañada. She ran into, as time goes by, who for a few races was just awesome. I mean, she threw in like 3 in a row, really big efforts, really big figures, and Marinan came back after that and also threw in a big figure and won that race. So, I mean, it's probably the spot for her if I'm looking to bet this race.
I completely agree. Basically, Matt sort of said everything I planned to say.
Sorry, Caleb.
I don't have a whole lot to. I mean, I think that I'm not against going global. I don't want to give the wrong impression.
No.
She is certainly the horse to beat. I mean, she's done almost nothing wrong. Ignore the dirt race. That's not what she wants to do. And she's got, 6 of 7 wins since arriving to the States or something like that. Yeah. Nothing against her whatsoever. But if I'm looking for some value, and 4 to 5 doesn't really do it for me, I'm totally with him on Park Avenue. This should be controlling speed in a race that doesn't have a ton of pace signed on. Juan Hernandez is riding outstanding at Santa Anita right now.
Oh, yeah.
Especially with Flavian Pratt and eventually Rispoli moving out east. So I think that's the horse I would look at. And even Avenue de France. I mean, if you look, this horse doesn't exactly do a ton of winning lately, but it does always show up. I mean, was only beaten 3 lengths to Legs Galore on a day that Legs Galore
way out.
Yeah. That was a race that was controlled in the front end. I mean, going to Vegas is an excellent mare, a grade 1 in her own right. And the race 2 back in the megahertz, that was a very slow pace. 25-1, 49-4. I thought she ran an excellent race to get 3rd within half a length there. She doesn't seem to have that, genuine, grade 2 killer instinct that we'd like to see. But if I'm playing stable duel in a 5-horse field, this horse will be in every stable I have.
Let's close things out with our Santa Anita coverage. After this, we're going to quickly head over to Sam Houston and just take a look at a few races that will kick off their mandatory payout pools on Saturday night. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. We hope all of you are having a nice Friday evening, and we wish you the best of luck on a fun Saturday coming up. This was a race that you may actually be able to find a little bit of value. It's a bigger field than the ones that we've been talking about, and it's not the race that I'm in right now. It's actually it's like as I'm going through this.
Wait a second, Dutch Bus isn't the number one.
Definitely not that one. Definitely not that one. I actually like a horse in here, and Matt, I think we talked a little bit about this horse earlier on today. I like the 9, Your Honor, and this is a filly who, I mean, you can just look at her whole career. She's done so little wrong. She doesn't go for a big barn, but it's a really good barn that always wins with the right stock, always wins at a nice clip. She was a winner first time out of the box, and she was, 6-1, because this is a barn that probably isn't going to take a lot of money first time out of the box, even though they do well early on. She comes back, she finishes second, then she puts back-to-back wins together, and those wins are at 6 furlongs on the dirt and at 7 furlongs on the dirt. One of them was against Open Company. Another one was in a first-level allowance against Cowbreds. Now she goes on to the turf. She has a brutal trip on February the 13th. And on March the 26th, she might have even had a worse trip, but she actually won the race this day, even with this brutal trip. So she's the one in here, Your Honor. So she, kind of misses the break, slow start, and she's last from the inside. And she's in tight, even right here. You can tell she's like, nah, I don't want to go up inside of that horse. So they just swing her out right away. It's like, nope, get me off the rail. Don't want to be down there. Let's go outside. But the problem is she's going to eventually right here, get stuck in between horses anyways. She's another one who's super green. She's kind of back there. You could tell she wants to go. I think she just wanted to be a little bit more forwardly placed. This was about as far back as she'd been in any of her prior races. And this isn't really the trip that you want on the grass either. Wide at the back like this, like 2 or 3 deep, you're better off saving ground and then, moving out. So right now she ends up getting stuck, and right here, boom, going to have to just completely tap on the brakes. What? Uh-oh. Most of the time, if that happens to a horse, you kind of just get like pulled up and like backed out of a race. Well, they still stick in there. She's waiting. Now she's got to completely back out and flip all the way to the outside. And I want to hear what Frank says, because it was like a funny comment at the end that I agreed with. Look at her swing out here, and she just like tips by. Hey, Frankie, what's going on, buddy? And a couple taps, and just gets by this horse that's got a few lengths on her.
Giant performance on the outside. Your Honor comes to Madiha, and Your Honor deserved that victory.
It's the way he said it, deserved that victory. I thought it was so matter of fact afterwards. Like, yeah, that was an impressive effort from Your Honor. And that was going a mile on the turf. But Caleb, looking at her races at 6 and 7 on the dirt, I think that distance can hit her right between the eyes very well. She's a great stable dual horse at 8-1 at only 3,000. And it's the kind of type of horse who's a nice pick 4, pick 5 horse, because she's not going to get bet because of the connections. And there are 3 or 4 other horses in here who are definitely going to take some money. Absolutely.
I liked this horse before I heard you talk, and now, I am all in, Gino. I'm ready to go. Your Honor, that was a huge race on the turf. But the horse, she's objectively, or maybe not objectively, but arguably a better dirt horse. So maybe she just does it all. I think she creates her own trip from the outside here. I was a little confused this race because you kind of have some jockey musical chairs going on here.
Yeah.
It's hard to really think Hernandez would hop off a horse like that he's been up every start and got 4 wins. He ends up on the 6, but Espinoza jumps off to land on the 8, where Mike Smith jumps off and then ends up on the 9, and we're back to square one. So when I don't understand it, I tend to disregard it and just not try to, really make too much out of nothing. But I'm with you. I love Your Honor here. of the short fields at Santa Anita, it's some big favorites. I'm not really interested in Connie Swingle very much. I'm a little curious as to what you guys thought of that horse. I think she's a really nice filly.
She's dealing with the layoff, going
the
6
layoff,
and she's down on the inside with some other speed to the outside of her. That's my concern. I think she's got a lot of ability, but you look right next door and you've got I guess at the spa, a few stalls down, you got Professor's Pride, who's going to go, and you got Everly's Girl, who I'd imagine the three of them are all going to be forwardly placed in here, and that could make things pretty tough on Connie Swingle, getting that inside shuffle, having to prove she can go 6.5. I would like her in a race or two down the line, but we looked at a couple small fields where it's like there really aren't options even in those races to find a horse that's going to be 5-1. Even 5-2 in some cases, right? Sure. This is a race where I think you at least have an opportunity to look for some of those horses. Like maybe we sniff one out here with you, Your Honor.
Yeah, absolutely. There's 9-5. There's other 9-5s I like a lot more. That's probably the best way to put it.
Exactly. Maddie, what do you think about the Evening Jewel?
Yeah, I like that 9. I actually had that 9 underneath when I did my picks. But I'll speak a little bit about the 3, Carmen Miranda. I think that's another 8-1 horse that's only going to cost you $3,000 on Stable Duel. So it's another good play. Will be kind of outside of that early speed of Connie Swingle and Big Novel. So that'll be interesting to see what those two do down on the rail. We already kind of touched on, but this was I thought a professional horse that should actually like getting stretched out, I think, to a 6.5 furlongs. And, if you look, you can kind of draw a line, I think, a little bit through the last 2 races in that one kind of sent her to the bench and the other kind of brought her back. And the one that brought her back was on turf, and she still ran, maybe her best, from a speed figure standpoint, ran her best race that day on the turf. So maybe this horse likes both surfaces, but I just think there's a little bit of value there. I think this horse should get a nice trip because there will be a little bit of speed, as you pointed out up front. So this horse can kind of sit behind that and kind of launch late. Has run up against some of these other horses before and held her own. So I think, Carmen Miranda, again, at 8-1, you have Rispoli on the mount for Phil D'Amato. And so I trust those connections, and it should provide you nice value in addition to the 9, who I also like quite a bit.
Great racing all around the country. Those 3 tracks have huge days, and one racetrack has their meet coming to an end. I just wanted to spend a few minutes giving a shout out to Sam Houston because they're honestly my favorite racetrack to play. As a gambler, we complain. We want more of our money back. And Sam Houston is one of the tracks that actually does exactly what we ask for. They give us 12% low takeout in all of the multi-race exotics. So it's not just like one pick 5 that you look at and you go, oh, okay, cool. There's a low takeout pick 5. They have 12% takeout every daily double, every pick 3, every pick 4, every pick 5, and then their pick 6. The pick 6 is not a jackpot either. It's a 50-cent pick 6 that rolls over. So I love the way they have everything formatted there. And I think for any of the folks that are watching this show, they probably might not be thinking about playing Sam Houston on a weekend when you're looking at Santa Anita and Keeneland and Aqueduct. But afterwards, later at night, when you're hanging out, Sam Houston has a night card. And what's cool is because it's the final day, all of the pools have mandatory payouts. So even if you just got a few bucks left in your account, put a small ticket in, because if there's some crazy long shot, there's not going to be any carryovers. You're going to end up getting a little bit more money back in your account. So I thought it was cool to maybe take a look at the 6th, 7th, and 8th races because those start those mandatory payouts. The 6th race begins the pick 6. The 7th race begins the pick 5. The 8th race begins the pick 4. And one of my favorite things about Sam Houston is win or lose, I always feel pretty confident about some nice prices to look at in the races. Now, in this 6th race, which kicks off the Space City Pick 6 on Saturday night, so we're looking at the past performances at DRF here for April the 9th, race number 6 at Sam Houston. The 3, totally logical. Asmussen and Elliott. The turf race, 2 starts back, was very good. Horse makes a lot of sense. I'll probably use in my pick 6. But this 5-horse Wittstock Hito is a little interesting to me. So the horses actually came in from Assiniboia Downs, And so they were trying to figure out where Wits Taquito sort of belonged. They weren't sure exactly where this horse stacked up. It takes a little while. Okay, 5 claimers, 10. Now we figured out, okay, this horse for J.R. Caldwell and Luzzy started to show a little bit more speed. Now they're going to step on the grass for the first time. What's nice about DRF is you click on the dam and you can get a look at, some of the pedigree statistics. The dam of this runner won 5 times on the turf. And what I love to see, not only did she win a lot on the grass, she actually wasn't even very good until she stepped on the grass. Her first 4 starts, she didn't show much of anything. She was well defeated against maiden claimers. They threw her in a maiden special weight going long on the turf. She was 18-1 and she finished second. She almost won the thing. And after that, she started having a really nice career on the turf. So I'm always curious to look over to the siblings and see, is there any direct turf success with the siblings? Well, Uncle Whit is a multiple winner on the turf, won twice on the grass. Whit's Little Apache raced on the grass 6 times. 2 of those were wins. You also see President Whit, another one. Now we're 3 for 3. 3 siblings that have raced on the grass. All 3 of them won on it. There are 2 siblings that raced on the grass that didn't win on it. Whit Love Tacos, who was 0 for 2, and Whit Chrome, who was 0 for 1 on the turf. And what that tells me, too, is those 2 horses didn't have a whole lot of success on there, but they only ran on the grass 3 times. It's pretty hard with that small of a sample size to even say they didn't like the grass. So I think this is a horse who's got a lot of reason for upside on the turf. This could be a really fun horse to have in multi-race exotics. If you're playing the pick 6 and this horse is in the 8 to 10-1 range, Wits Taquito is going to be a fun horse to use in the pick 6 for me. Caleb, was there anything in this race that you were looking at in a pick 6 situation?
Gino, I thought I was going to be clever and talk about the 5, and I'm
Nice.
like, surely nobody else is going to look at this horse, but should have known that you would dig into the pedigree. And if I had to pick a price here, it would certainly be Wits Taquito.
Yeah. And stable
the breeding is there. There's no question. I mean, the horse is only 4 years old in a field that has a number of horses that I've seen enough of that are 5, 6, 7 years old and still in non-winners of one other than company. I want a lightly raced horse. I want a horse trying something new. These are very strong connections at Sam Houston. There's pedigree here. And realistically, I mean, we may not think a ton of some of the claiming races or some of the races north of the border, but there is a noticeable difference in class when you drop into state bred company, especially when it's Texas bred. We're not talking New York breds or something worth or Florida breds or Cal breds. I mean, this is Texas bred, and I think that this horse ran a strong race last time out and should improve when he gets to the turf. So I'm completely with you. I don't have any other real strong opinions on price horses. I think the 2, 3, and 13 all kind of make sense, but I expect them all to take their fair share of action. But the 5 is the only horse I thought was interesting that should be a good price.
Yeah, and if the horse gets bet a little bit in stable duel, it doesn't matter at all, right? You're paying up in the morning line for a horse that's 12-1. So a great way to build. I think they have a nice, fun closeout stable duel contest. I think it's like a top 3. It's like a big money game there too to close things out. So anything to mention in this 6th race here, Matt?
I'll just I agree. I mean, I heard you talk about Wits Taquito earlier this morning, and maybe we need to get Caleb's opinion on tacos, because we found out the sniper doesn't like tacos.
I know.
What?
Yeah. Barry came out with just hot this morning.
Like, Barry, you're so well loved. You got to keep stuff like that to yourself.
I don't even know if I can trust his opinion on horses anymore.
I know. My world was turned upside down, but I will say, from a stable duel perspective, I wouldn't include this horse in horizontals, but I do think the 10 Cowboy Ridge at 12-1 is a horse that's intriguing. Has run pretty well the last 2 times out, or 2 of the last 3 times out, going a mile on the turf, and actually beat one of a couple of fellow runners those times. So there's a little something there for a horse that might hit the board underneath.
Picks up a lot of pieces.
Yeah, exactly. And again, from a stable duel standpoint, you need to. That's one of the things about Sam Houston. It's not quite as like Santa Anita, but there are some horses, or there are some races, I should say, where those connections of Asmussen and Elliott, or Eichelberry and Gustafson, are just so strong, and they're running on 6-5 favorites that you need to find multiple 10-1, 12-1, 15-1 horses. So you could do worse than Cowboy Ridge, I think, some spots.
Let's get to race number 7, first level allowance. And again, they know what they're doing, Caleb. They stack these last part of the card with really contentious races. They're deep, right? These are not short fields, which you can get sometimes at Sam Houston or at any racetrack. These are hard races for the payouts. If you're trying to steal some of this mandatory money, you're going to have to earn it.
Oh, for sure. I mean, when I saw the track list you sent me over, I was like, that's a lot of races. I wasn't thinking like, let's cut Sam Houston. I was thinking like, let's cut Santa Anita. But, you know, I was thinking, I love me some Sam Houston. It's such a player-friendly track. The fields, I feel like they've struggled a little bit with field sizes a couple times this meet.
Me too.
But not tomorrow. Tomorrow's huge fields, very competitive races.
Yep.
I thought this was another great race, and they run late. So when you're done, you know, stacking up all that paper after winning at Keeneland and Aqueduct and Santa Anita, you can come play Sam Houston. So
it works either way because you've either made a bunch of money and you got it sitting there, or you need to get it back, right? You need
that get out pick 4, right?
You got the itch, right? You got the itch. You need to get it scratched. Here we go. So talk to us about the 7th race, Caleb.
Yeah, sure. So this race, if it hasn't been apparent by now, I always look at a race from the pace first. You know, I need to visualize kind of how I think the race is going to set up. And this race, I thought, felt pretty contentious. I thought there was an honest bit of pace signed on here. We'll see if that changes after scratches or whatnot. But I thought there was probably 3 or 4 horses in here that need to be forwardly placed. So the horse I actually kind of like here, and he is a price, although I'm a little dubious that you get more in line, is the number 4, Gushing Oil. So, I mean, I work in the energy industry, so that's kind of a 2-for-1 for me. Nice, but we get Ryan Huckleberry and Austin Gustafson. So, you know, these connections tend to get bet. But I thought that this horse, you know, he was very impressive as a 2-year-old. He won a good race as a maiden. They threw him into some stakes races where he didn't totally show up. But if you look at who he was running against, I mean, the Springboard Mile, I mean, this horse had Derby aspirations.
He's the 6 in this race that we're watching. So he breaks right on top, but then he's got some options, right? He can 6.
Exactly.
Which is what we'd like to see in a race like this. And this was going 6.5. So they might be a little bit quicker in here just with, I think, there being some horses that are faster. So I like this trip for him. And he seems like a horse who, you know, checks a lot of boxes for me. When I'm looking at things that I like, angles that I like for handicapping, like he's got this nice tactical style. He is going to go now 3rd start off the bench. You mentioned his A-game races are right there and as good, pretty comparable with the rest of the field. And another horse where, yeah, maybe he gets bet a little bit. If he's 4 or 5 to 1, that's fine. And if he's, you know what, 8 to 1 is a great stable duel horse. Again, you know, like now we're looking at a stable duel lineup on Saturday night where we could have a horse here who's 3,000. In the race before, we only spent 750, and that's 2 of our races right now that we feel pretty confident about. This is a nice effort. He puts the speed away, and, you know, he's able to, he gets a little tired here, but he straightens himself back out. And this is what determined like a well-measured win. The horse down on the inside was never going to get him or anything. He's got this horse measured all the way around. So I think he's a must-use in like pick 5s, pick 4s, anything like that. You know, if you're playing the late pick 5, which starts right here, he feels really, really solid. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. No, I was on the same horse. I like Gushing Oil as well. I mean, as somebody who played Sam Houston, you know, all meet, one of the things, you know, one of the first things I do, actually, I tend to look through the card and try to look at where Eichelberry and Gustafson might have a price, just because I'm like, oh, what's going on with this horse? Like, you know, a lot of times it's like, you know, when it's not 9 to 5, I'm like, oh, is this a 3-legged horse? Is this like, what's going on here? And so I know this was a horse I saw and I thought, well, this is, you know, the nice effort after, you know, over a year layoff, came back and, you know, ran really well. And so I do like the 4 quite a bit. I think, you know, to Caleb's point, the pace of the race is going to set up nicely. It should come from off the lead. I do think I was impressed by the other Gustafson horse as well, the 5 Moro Wolf right underneath.
Yeah, I agree.
12 to 1 for, I mean, now he'll probably be a little bit more tied up in the lead, but it doesn't need the lead. I mean, can maybe sit back a little bit. And what always impresses me is when a horse breaks his maiden and goes straight up to an allowance race and wins the next time out. I mean, you don't see that a lot, especially at a place like Sam Houston. A lot of times it's win a maiden, go up, and then finish fifth, and that sort of a thing. So I thought, in races like this, I like to go with lightly raced horses and, kind of younger horses. So I thought that was another horse that provided some value.
Yeah, a couple just worth taking a look at. Jackman defeated alternate time and perfect dude who came out of that race to win. So obviously he comes out of a live race there. He's sort of interesting because I don't think he's quite as fast as a couple others. So he could probably get a pressing trip. The 3 could get a nice trip in here too. Need a better jock, cutting back, probably getting more of an off the pace trip in here, turning back from the mile and a 16th to 6 furlongs. I'm not really that high on the 8, who's really fast, but we've got another horse who the layoff stuff concerned me, right? Yeah. This is a horse who, sure, if they clear the field, yeah, but I don't know. I probably want to see a race or two before taking a short price on this horse. Heck, I'd prefer the 9 at a massive price. That last race, it wasn't big on the buyer scale, but the race was not that bad in a big field. And there are a few races here that you can make a case for this horse. I wouldn't talk you off throwing a Mizzoni into a spot or two in race number 7 at Sammy Houston. Closing night on Saturday. Let's take a look at one more race before we get out of here. Thanks so much to Caleb and to Matt for hanging out and rolling along through on what's an awesome Saturday. We are going to be early in the morning to late in the evening playing these races all day long. And Caleb, in this 8th race, $25,000 non-4 claimer, 7 furlongs. Who are you looking at here?
Yeah, this was another race that I thought there was some value in here.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm maybe not as adamantly against the favorites in here. I mean, I think that
I completely agree, right?
That makes sense.
5, I'm not as I'm not off so completely against them, but you can make cases for a few others that are big prices.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that the 2 is a horse that I certainly respect. Yep. The 5 is a horse that on the barn change, coming out of 2 pretty prolific barns into a barn that I'm not as familiar with, maybe I'd feel a little more confident taking a shot against there while moving up in class. But I think there's a lot of ways you can go. A horse that I actually found pretty interesting in this race was actually the horse to the far outside, the number 10, Big Power Red.
Yeah.
So this was a horse that I thought, really ran well in his last start at Sam Houston once he got to an appropriate level. I mean, this is not an allowance horse in all likelihood, but if you look at the claiming races specifically at Sam Houston, they're all very good.
Yep.
I mean, this is a strong barn that's winning at a good clip this year. Whenever Floyd Wethy is hooking up with Scott Young, they're, in the last 60 days, they're 31% together with a positive ROI. And I'm a big fan when it comes to 7 furlong races. That's kind of what I refer to as the manatee distance, where you just never really know who wants 6 and who wants 2 turns, and you get to 7. I love cutbacks. I'll almost always take a horse cutting back from a mile as opposed to stretching out from 6 when it comes to this kind of a race.
Yep.
So I think this horse has the conditioning underneath of him. He clearly stays a mile, and he likes Sam Houston. I think he'll get a good trip from the outside, stalking the pace. And at 15-1, I think he's really interesting at a price.
Yep. Matt, any thoughts on this 8th race?
Yeah. So just to kind of reiterate the connections, I thought the 6 Shanghai Dreams was kind of interesting. It's an Asmussen Elliott
you got both
connection.
The 4 and the 6, if you're looking at just on connections plays for horses that may get bet a little bit and might be good value stable duel plays.
Yeah, and that's the thing is this is a horse that'll cost you $1,000 on stable duel that will probably go off under 5-1. I would be, and we'll get bet down. Also, it should be noted that last night I think Asmussen won. Was it 6 races?
I think in a row.
Yeah, I mean, he just couldn't.
Elliott.
I mean, yeah,
Elliott won 6 in a row on the card. One of those nights where it's like you got to sort of look back at that night and kind of toss some of the results, because it was like when a batter in baseball is just you can't get him out, right?
Yeah.
When there's Steph Curry is going nuts and he makes every 3. It's like when someone's making every right move, it's like just toss the results, because that was that Stuart Elliott night,
Yeah, so maybe they just close out this meet like super strong, but it's and Elliott was on I think 5 of those 6, if not all of them, and so he was. But this is a horse that to Caleb's point seems to like 7 furlongs, and has run good races at 7 furlongs and has run, and while he's not won at 7 furlongs, has run behind some nice horses and declined. Hugh Ellen, who's, those are both next time out winners, who he finished behind. So I think there's some ability there at 7 furlongs. The speed figures are right there. Again, at this kind of $25,000 claiming level, I think this is certainly a useful horse from a stable duel standpoint. Maybe not the strongest win contender, but I think a horse to certainly think about including underneath to add some value in exotics.
Shanghai, yeah, for me, like if I'm playing the late pick 4, the 6 definitely on my ticket, the 10's on the ticket for sure. And I probably will play a ticket or two where I single one of the bigger price horses that I like. And I agree with Caleb. Like, I'm not really against the 2, the 5. Mm-hmm. This barn is more of like a quarter horse and like 870 barn. So they're capable and they can win a lot. They can win with thoroughbred horses too. They have last year. They just don't have any recently here, and they're more of like the shorter thoroughbred races. So I'm okay with Mr. K. This will probably be more of the spread race for me, but the 2 that I thought were at least worth mentioning were the 6, Shanghai's Dream, and the 4, who, you can go back to Conative here. And this is a horse who got squeezed back at the start, was last, was 8 lengths off in that last start, and actually didn't run all that poorly in that race. And I think that the 7 furlongs might be a really nice trip for Conative. You see towards the bottom of the page here, the win at 7 furlongs sitting off the pace a little bit. You see the Delta win going 6.5. I think that might be a little bit better for Conative. 15-1 for top-notch connections on an awesome horse racing weekend coming up. Caleb, my friend, thank you so much for hanging out with us. It was great to catch up with you again. And anytime you want on Friday, open invitation. We go every Friday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern time, and we do the this weekend in stable duel. We go through, whatever best bets we have for Friday or for Saturday contest. We usually have 5 or 6 best bets each for those couple days, and Barry joins us. So we'd love to have you.
And next week we're gonna have tacos for breakfast.
Yeah,
and then Barry won't be able to join anymore.
3 or 4 experts say that tacos are great. So
yeah, so exactly. Caleb, awesome stuff. Catching up with you again, buddy. Thank you so much. Tell everybody where we can follow you and where some of the content that you have out there.
Yeah, sure. So you can follow me on Twitter. My handle's in the tag here at CalebWVU. I do a stream on Thursdays with a couple other guys. We're called On the Wrong Lead. You can catch us at Wrong Lead on Twitter. And then I put out some Derby preview shows, quick little mini bites about 8 to 10 minutes each, typically for Horse Racing Nation. You can find that on their website or on YouTube if you just look up Horse Racing Nation. So yeah, great to be on again, Gino and Matt. It's always fun.
Caleb, I'm already starting to put together my prep show, because for Derby and Oaks racing weekend, I have one guest help me out with all the graded stakes races on the undercard. So I kind of assign one for each person, and then I can bring them on and talk Oaks and Derby. So I'd love to have you on the podcast. If I don't talk to you or touch base before then, let's pencil in that the week leading up to Derby and Oaks, so I can pick your brain on those big races and 1 or 2 of the undercard.
You got it. I'd love to do it.
Maddie, my friend, are you sick of me yet? Are you
hey, as I've said before, we haven't gone on a road trip together yet, Gino.
That was the key.
So
I
we're
told you.
Still good.
From a distance, I'm great, but you just don't want to deal with me for more than 24 hours. Then I'm just too much. I just get way too much. So too much singing.
Doing great.
Too crazy. Caleb, Matt, you guys have a fantastic rest of your Friday night. Everyone out there, thank you so much for hanging out. Good luck to you all weekend long. If you ever have a question about the races, I'm always here and always very happy to help. If you ever have a question about the DRF past performances and some of the tools that we were using, how cool are these, right? We can 1 click, watch a race replay. 1 click, we look at a chart. 1 click, we look at the pedigree. 1 click, we got the trainer information. It's all right there for you at drf.com. Good luck on Saturday this weekend. And a big shout out to my buddy. Always going to give him some love, Joey Cleveland. He helps me out with all the music for my shows. And he put together the little rock horse racing intro. So shout out, Joey. Good night, Caleb. Good night, Matt.